Hey, so today I've got the Polyend synth with me, but really this one's about all the Polyend friends, so the Tracker Plus, the Play Plus, the Mini, as well as the synth, because they do have really nice engines and patches on there. But today we are focusing on how to set up macros. So I'm going to go through each individual device to show how to set up a synth, as well as get and start editing patches as well as those macros. A little bit of discussion about how the synth handles macros compared to the rest of the machines. A little bit of theory on how I go about setting up macros for myself. I'm going to do it in a different bit of software, so we're not thinking about the device, we're thinking about macros. And then we'll come back on the Tracker Plus and just do a bit of a demo on why we bring all this together and why macros make our lives so much easier. So let's get straight into it. So I've got the Tracker Plus right now, and if you want to know where these synths live, if you hold instrument, you can see them up the top here. So that's all our sample memory. If you scroll all the way down, that's our MIDI stuff. But if you choose one of these, that's where your synths live, and that's how you put them in. And you can put them in the first 8 channels, so they're sample based, and the last 8 channels, they're MIDI based, so anywhere you want, those synth sounds are going to work. And if we come up into instrument parameters up here, that's how you start editing them and go into the edit patch. If you've been following along with the first 5 synth engines on here, so this is just the way that we interact with the sound. So I'm currently working on the percussion synth, but we use this grid here to move between our matrix. It's got a nice way to play our sounds as well. And what we do is we come in here, choose our variables, and then we can go in and choose them. So that's how we interact with the tracker and set it up. Alright, so we're on to the Tracker Mini, and for this one, same thing, you hold up the instrument and there they are up the top here. So if you want to select one, you can use the little arrows, you can use these arrows, but you can also use the big arrows to get around. That's where the MIDI stuff is. So if we go all the way up to the top, that's how you bring it up. Now I do have some macros in here, but what you want to do is go into the instrument parameters here, or for me, I've got them set to this button here, and that's how we get into it, go into edit patch. Now it works similar to the Tracker Plus, but we use this to navigate around, and then we select the one that we want, and then we have our control here. And a little bit different, we use the big plus and big minus to move around on this menu here. So that's how we edit on the Tracker Mini. Alright, so we're on to the Play Plus, and this one we do it through the MIDI. So hold shift and go MIDI, you'll see this area turn purple, and what we need to do is change the sample. So we'll scroll through, and all the way at the end, that's where we find our 3 synths. So I can plot them in. As you can see, they're sort of color coded as well. So I'll just do Acid and Wavetable FM. So each one of them have a different color. You can quickly change up the sound by changing the sample, this one, and then you can choose which sample you want. But say we want to edit this, we can go into the rotary encoder, so press it down, go into synth, go into the one that you want to edit. You go to the modes here, you can go edit patch, and then you get this menu where you scroll through, and like say if you want to change one of these up, you click and go back. That's how you change them up. And that's why I use the Tracker Plus to show all this, because it gives a little bit more of a visual representation how everything sort of goes together. But really, like, it's clearly defined. It's just a bit of a list layout, and you go through and tweak everything with the rotary encoder. But if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, that's where the macros are, and that's how we can select and edit them. So we can go through and change everything up. Alright, we're here with the Polyend synth, and this one, everything's a little bit more laid out in hardware. Like as you can see, we've got our 3 synth areas here. We can change between them just pressing that button, and we have all the areas accessible by these buttons here. So we've got engine, filter, ADSR, LFO. If we go shift and mod, that's all our invisible hand stuff. The sequencer on here is more tied to the scene, so more the project itself. But those are the areas, and the way we change the settings is we follow the little guides down here, and then there's a few times when we need to jump through menus up here. But that's really how we do it. But to access the macros, we come into here, go down to macros, and that's going to be based on the synth that you select in here. So I've got a blue one, I come in here, go macros, go in here, and then I can choose a spot by selecting, and then just tapping one of those points, and it's going to put it in there. I can use that to scroll around, and I can also test it out by moving it. So that's how we edit a macro on the synth. So I've just got the Tracker Plus and the synth out right now because there's a little technical thing that I wanted to figure out. Mainly that we only get 3 macros on the synth, but we get 6 on the tracker. So I just wanted to do a quick test to see how those patches will transfer across, because this is a really nice way to make our patches, but how we get all 6 macros and all together. So I just want to do a bit of a technical test, and my verdict is what I think is happening under the hood. If I just go into here, so what is happening, this is actually a patch made on the synth. So these ones up here follow correctly, but these ones here are following something else. So what I think is happening, if we just go into the macros here, is they're sort of hidden behind the menu. It's not taking the velocity and aftertouch and putting them on these ones here. I can't see any connection between the two. So if I just jump into velocity, that would be number 4. So it'll be the volume that will be controlling. So what I'm thinking is these ones here are just hidden away from the synth itself. So maybe in the future we might see, if we hold shift and control these knobs, we might get access to 4, 5 and 6. But that is just something to consider when you're patch making and sending them around your different devices. So that's enough with the technical. Let's have a look at some theory, and I thought let's use Vital for this one just because it's got a really nice visual interface, but it's got 4 macros, and this is really where it cemented my mindset about having fewer macros, but the way you use them can really open up the sound and being able to get really nice controls. So I've just got Renot in the background just to make it look a little special, but really what I do is when I first come to making my patch is I make that initial sound. So this is the sound that I want to use. So it's just a little plucky bass line that I wanted, but the idea is that there's a second synth in here that I want to move to, and that's where I use these macros to get there. So if I turn these up, you'll get a much different sound. So it's quite big and lush, and really once we've got those 2 parts in between, how we align those macros is going to enable us to get to that sound. So my methodology or my mindset is the first one is always the way to change the color of the sound. So if I just turn those 2 off and just give it a mid-range one, as you can hear, this one has a second oscillator that's a lot higher. So I have a lot more control to get the sound that I want, but it's just focusing on the color, because the next one in line, as you heard when I turned it up, this is always controlling that filter itself. Whether that's a high pass or a low pass or whatever, but it's controlling the actual character of the sound. So one's, you're trying to separate different areas that you have more controls to get from point A to point B, like you might go the low road or go towards a higher road, but really all paths lead to Rome, and really having separate routes that you can do it with, you're going to get a lot more range out of your synthesizer. So this one here is always like my envelope, so I can open it right up if I want to, or I can make it short and plucky. And the last one is texture, and really this is context sensitive to the synthesizer you have. With the Polyend Tracker Play and Mini, they actually control the reverb and delay send, but on the synth you will have to go into the scene properties and adjust those settings there. But really this is where you think about like the texture you can get out of the synthesizer you're working with. So it's like with all these machines, you've got a variety of engines. They've got some really cool features in there, and the texture is always my way of like how to create some experiment stuff. So I've got hooked into some of the effects in Vital, but really when it comes down to the Polyend gear, I'm like leveraging the modulations with LFOs as well as those invisible hands to really change up the sound in a really interesting way. So it just gives me a lot wider range to hit, but both the start and the end point sound good to myself. So really it's those paths in between that we're really caring about, because you can like dial in some really nice nuggets in there. So let's have a look on the Polyend Tracker how we can set this up. Bringing it back to one of the Polyend devices, let's use a tracker. I've just got this cool little groovy thing that's using the drum synth as well as that bass line, but let's put that theory to practice on this synth here, because I've done a bit of the work so you don't have to follow me naming everything and adjusting all the values. But if I jump straight in there, go into edit the patches, you notice I've gone through, make sure I had correct naming. So most of these, if you come up to the top, you can edit and edit there, so you get the little keyboard that works on every single one. But what you want to do is start allocating things and start being able to control the sound. So as you can see with my changing the sound itself, I've got an oscillator change, I've got a brightness change, I've got the reset change, and then I've just, like, this one doesn't really matter then, but really it shows that there's a bunch of different elements going and throwing. So if I just hit play, so all that kicked in, and that's just changed from one axis to another. So when I'm working and changing the sounds, you'll usually have, it'll start out with the basic sound that I've set up, and then what I'll do is I'll just crank it up to 100, come back into here to edit it, make the changes on the fly, and just listen to what that second sound's going to be in between. Like another one I did, if I jump straight back into the mixer, just take that one away, is this experiment one. If I play, so there's a lot of fine tune of those different wobbles, but what I really did was making sure that the wobble sound up to here sounded something useful, and everything in between should be a good range that I could find some nice sweet spots in. So really, like, I'll be playing along and then have all these up max, and so that was the second version of the sound that I created. So as you can see, I've got those clear, distinct areas of changing the color, having control over the filter, because that adds a lot to our sound. The movement, which is more of like changing that ADSR and making something a lot longer, as well as a sort of experimental add flavor or FX. And really, like if I was doing this on the synth, it usually has the timbre, the filter, and the experimental, but we do have 6 on the other one. But really 4, you can get a lot out of this machine. Like if I was to just start live playing this thing, and that's how you can lose a lot of time just mucking around. So in the end, I hope that's given you a bit of food for thought, because really this extends beyond just the Polyend friends. Like all the synthesizers behind me, I try and set up macros in this way where it's like I have the most interesting parts up front, so being able to color the sound, being able to change the filter, some sort of movement and some sort of effect, or just one way to crazy up the sound. Because really once you have those sort of key areas undermined, like you can add more, you can add less, but really you're going to have a lot more control over how that sound's going to come out. And really focusing on those 2 points, so you like got a part A and a part B, it's all those bits in between that you get to capture and sort of tweak and play with. So really thinking of it as 2 different synth patches that you set up, and that in between, that's really going to extend you out as well. So if you did enjoy this one, definitely give it the thumbs up. It does tell the people on the internet how to do macros, especially on the Polyend friends, as well as if you got any comments or queries, because I didn't feel like I covered everything in those original synth patches, and moving forward I will be using the synth to highlight those new synth engines. So please feel free to leave them down below. I do go down there and try and answer everything I go, especially being close to these machines. I can poke and prod at them and figure out if what you're asking can be done. So definitely go do that. And if you're interested in Polyend content, I do have a bit of that on my channel now. So if you're interested in that, I look forward to seeing you next time.